Perhaps you've heard already, but just this past week, NASA announced that their DART program, which is this thing they're doing to practice fending off asteroids, was a success. After much perseverance, for the first time in the history of mankind, we have successfully altered the path of a celestial object. Imagine that, first time in the history of mankind. So they sent a spacecraft towards this asteroid 7 billion miles away, and one which was not on the path to collide with us, but convenient to practice on. And the spacecraft hit it, slightly changing the course enough to make a difference, should we ever need to do so in the far distant future. But just imagine how much it took to accomplish that, the persistence. The engineers and scientists knew it must be possible, so how do we get it done, they thought. I remember this thought process in engineering school. There's some scenario that an engineer needs to design a solution to. Eventually you get pretty good at sensing what exactly is possible using the knowledge and tools at your disposal, even though the way to get there is not obvious. But I knew that if I just kept thinking and brainstorming, running numbers, drawing things, there would be a way. It would get done. Now compare this to prayer and this parable of the widow and the judge. The widow knows that there is a solution to her predicament, and she knows that the judge is able to help in the form of a favorable judgment, and that this judgment would alter the course of her life for the better. So she persists. She keeps asking the judge, "Render me this solution, please." Now, is prayer like that? Is prayer like that? It may seem like Jesus is telling us, yes, it is, that if one simply persists, you'll get what you're asking for, because God will get tired and finally relent, that you can effect a change by persisting. Yet the problem with that is God does not change. God is immutable. God is unchangeable. God does not change his mind. It'd be much more possible to change the path of an asteroid than to change God. So I don't think that's what Jesus is saying here. Jesus isn't saying that God will grow tired of our asking and finally relent. No. Prayer doesn't change God. Prayer changes us. Just think, what if the widow had stopped asking the judge? She would have become hopeless. She would stop caring about herself. She would fall into some darkness. Yet, instead, the act of persistently approaching the judge, who, as Jesus colored him, was unloving and reluctant, she, even in that unloving judge, lives out her faith in the judge. She strengthens her hope in the outcome. She develops a deeper love for herself. Now flip that around. If that's true for the widow and the judge in this parable, then how much more true for us and God? When we persist in prayer, we're not praying to an unloving, reluctant judge, but rather a loving, just, powerful, merciful God. Way better in comparison to the judge in the parable. When we persist in prayer, we live out our faith, our trust in God. When we persist in prayer, we strengthen our hope in the outcome that God will give us what we need, not simply what we want. We develop a deeper love for God when we persist in prayer, and a deeper love for our neighbor and ourselves. And lastly, when we persist in prayer, our will is slowly conformed to God's will. That's what we prayed for in the opening prayer of Mass. That our will would be conformed to God's will. Prayer does not change God, prayer changes us. Now, how does he do it? By first giving us the grace to pray. Whenever we pray, God's grace enables us to do so. Ever since that day of our baptism, God's grace, sanctifying grace, was at work in us. And of course, the greatest prayer Jesus gave us is the prayer we're doing now, the Holy Mass, whereby God accomplishes his great divine plan of himself, who is greater than the whole universe, taking the form of simple bread and wine, so that we might consume him, so that he might transform us into himself. Because prayer does not change God, prayer changes us.